Hello, my kiddos. Okay, we're finally at Isengard. Let's pick that up there. Beneath the mountain's arm, within the wizard's vale, through years uncounted had stood that ancient place that men called Isengard. Partly it was shaped in the making of the mountains, but mighty works the men of Westerness had wrought there of old. And Saruman had dwelt there long and had not been idle. This was its fashion. While Saruman was at his height, accounted by many the chief of wizards, a great ring wall of stone, like towering cliffs, stood out from the shelter of the mountainside, from which it ran and then returned again. One entrance only was there made in it, a great arch delved into the southern wall. Here through the black rock a long tunnel had been hewn, closed at either end with mighty doors of iron. They were so wrought and poised upon their huge hinges, posts of steel driven into the living stone, that when unbarred they could be moved with a light thrust of the arms, noiselessly. One who passed in and came at length out of the echoing tunnel beheld a plain, a great circle, somewhat hollowed like a vast shallow bowl. A mile it measured from rim to rim. Once it had been green and filled with avenues and groves of fruitful trees, watered by streams that flowed from the mountains to the lake. But no green thing grew there in the latter days of Saruman. The roads were paved with stone flags, dark and hard, and beside their borders, instead of trees, there marched long lines of pillars, some of marble, some of copper and of iron, joined by heavy chains. Many houses there were, chambers, halls, and passages, cut and tunneled back into the walls upon their inner side, so that all the open circle was overlooked by countless windows and dark doors. Thousands could dwell there, workers, servants, slaves, and warriors, with great store of arms. Wolves were fed and stabled in deep dens beneath. The plain, too, was bored and delved. Shafts were driven deep into the ground. Their upper ends were covered by low mounds and domes of stone, so that the moonlight of the ring of Isengard looked like a graveyard of so that in the moonlight the ring of Isengard looked like a graveyard of unquiet dead. For the ground trembled. The shafts ran down by many slopes and spiral stairs to caverns far under. There Saruman had treasuries, storehouses, armories, smithies, and great furnaces. Iron wheels revolved there endlessly and hammers thudded. At night plumes of vapor steamed from the vents, lit from beneath with red light, or blue, or venomous green. To the center all the roads ran between their chains. There stood a tower of marvelous shape. It was fashioned by the builders of old, who smoothed the ring of Isengard, and yet it seemed a thing not made by the craft of men, but riven from the bones of the earth and the ancient torment of the hills. A peak and isle of rock it was, black and gleaming hard. 4 mighty piers of many-sided stone were welded into one, but near the summit they opened into gaping horns, their pinnacles sharp as the points of spears, keen-edged as knives. Between them was a narrow space, and there upon a floor of polished stone, written with strange signs, a man might stand 500 feet above the plain. This was Orthanc, the citadel of Saruman, the name of which had, by design or chance, a twofold meaning, for in the Elvish speech Orthanc signifies Mount Fang, but in the language of the Mark of old, the cunning mind. A strong place and wonderful was Isengard, and long it had been beautiful. And there great lords had dwelt, the wardens of Gondor upon the west, and wise men that watch the stars. But Saruman had slowly shaped it to his shifting purposes, and made it better, as he thought, being deceived. For all those arts and subtle devices for which he forsook his former wisdom, and which fondly he imagined were his own, came but from Mordor, so that what he made was not only a little copy, a child's model of a slave's flattery, of that vast fortress, armory, prison, furnace of great power, Barad-dûr, the dark tower, which suffered no rival, and laughed at flattery, biding its time, secure in its pride and its immeasurable strength. This was the stronghold of Saruman, as fame reported it, for within living memory the men of Rohan had not passed its gates, save perhaps a few, such as Wormtongue, who came in secret and told no man what they saw. Now Gandalf rode to the great pillar of the hand, and passed it. As he did so, the riders saw to their wonder that the hand appeared no longer white. It was stained as with dried blood, and looking closer, they perceived that its nails were red. Unheeding, Gandalf rode into the mist, and reluctantly they followed him. All about them now, as if there had been a sudden flood, wide pools of water lay beside the road, filling the hollows and rills when trickling down among the stones. At last Gandalf halted and beckoned to them, and they came, and saw that beyond him the mists had cleared, and a pale sunlight shone. The hour of noon had passed. They were come to the doors of Isengard. But the doors lay hurled and twisted on the ground, and all about stone, cracked and splintered into countless jagged shards, was scattered far and wide, or piled in ruinous heaps. The great arch still stood, but it opened now upon a roofless chasm. The tunnel was laid bare, and through the cliff-like walls on either side great rents and breaches had been torn. Their towers were beaten into dust. If the great sea had risen in wrath and fallen on the hills with storm, it could have worked no greater ruin. The ring beyond was filled with steaming water, a bubbling cauldron in which there heaved and floated a wreckage of beams and spars, chests and casks, and broken gear. Twisted and leaning pillars reared their splintered stems above the flood. But all the roads were drowned. Far off, it seemed, half veiled in winding cloud, there loomed the island rock. Still dark and tall, unbroken by the storm, the tower of Orthanc stood. Pale waters lapped about its feet. The king and all his company sat silent on their horses, marveling, perceiving that the power of Saruman was overthrown. But how, they could not guess, and now they turned their eyes towards the archway and the ruined gates. There they saw close beside them a great rubble heap, and suddenly they were aware of two small figures lying on it at their ease, grey-clad, hardly to be seen among the stones. There were bottles and bowls and platters laid beside them, as if they had just eaten well, and now rested from their labor. One seemed asleep, the other, with crossed legs and arms behind his head, leaned back against a broken rock and sent from his mouth long wisps and little rings of thin blue smoke. Who's that, kiddos? For a moment, Theoden and Eomer and all his men stared at them in wonder. Amid all the wreck of Isengard, this seemed to them the strangest sight. But before the king could speak, the small, smoke-breathing figure became suddenly aware of them as they sat there silent on the edge of the mist. He sprang to his feet. A young man he looked, or like one, though not much more than half a man in height. His head of brown curling hair was uncovered, but he was clad in a travel-stained cloak of the same hue and shape as the companions of Gandalf had worn when they rode to Edoras. He bowed very low, putting his hand upon his breast. Then, seeming not to observe the wizard and his friends, he turned to Eomer and the king. Welcome, my lords, to Isengard, he said. We are the door wardens. Meriadoc, son of Saradoc, is my name, and my companion, who, alas, is overcome with weariness, here he gave the other a dig with his foot, is Peregrine, son of Paladin, of the house of Took. Far in the north is our home. The Lord Saruman is within, but at the moment he is closeted with one Wormtongue, or doubtless he would be here to welcome such honorable guests. Doubtless he would, laughed Gandalf. And was it Saruman that ordered you to guard his damaged doors and watch for the arrival of guests, when your attention could be spared from plate and bottle? No, good sir, the matter escaped him, answered Merry, gravely. He has been much occupied. Our orders came from Treebeard, who has taken over the management of Isengard. He commanded me to welcome the Lord of Rohan with fitting words. I have done my best. And what about your companions? What about Legolas and me? Cried Gimli, unable to contain himself longer. You rascals! You woolly-footed and woolly-pated truants! A fine hunt you have led us, 200 leagues through fen and forest, battle and death to rescue you. And here we find you feasting and idling and smoking! Smoking! Where did you come by the weed, you villains? Hammer and tongs! I am so torn between rage and joy that if I do not burst, it will be a marvel. You speak for me, Gimli, laughed Legolas, though I would sooner learn how they came by the wine. One thing you have not found in your hunting, and that's brighter wits, said Pippin, opening an eye. Here you find us sitting on a field of victory amid the plunder of armies, and you wonder how we came by a few well-earned comforts? Well earned, said Gimli. I cannot believe that. The riders laughed. It cannot be doubted that we witnessed the meeting of dear friends, said Theoden. So these are the lost ones of your company, Gandalf? The days are fated to be filled with marvels. Already I have seen many since I left my house, and now here before my eyes, and yet another of the folk of legend. Are not these the halflings that some among us call the Holbitlan? Hobbits, if you please, lord, said Pippin. Hobbits, said Theoden. Your tongue is strangely changed, but the name sounds not unfitting so. Hobbits. No report that I have heard does justice to the truth. Merry bowed, and Pippin got up and bowed low. You are gracious, lord, or I hope that I may so take your words, he said. And here is another marvel. I have wandered in many lands since I left my home, and never till now have I found people that knew any story concerning hobbits. My people came from out of the north long ago, said Theoden. But I will not deceive you. We know no tales about hobbits. All that is said among us is that far away, over many hills and rivers, live the halfling folk that dwell in holes and in sand dunes. But there are no legends of their deeds, for it is said that they do little and avoid the sight of men, being able to vanish in a twinkling, and they can change their voices to resemble the piping of birds. But it seems that more could be said. It could indeed, lord, said Merry. For one thing, said Theoden, I had not heard that they spouted smoke from their mouths. That is not surprising, answered Merry, for it is an art which we have not practiced for more than a few generations. It was Tabold Hornblower of Longbottom in the South Farthing who first grew the true pipeweed in his gardens, about the year 1070 according to our reckoning. How old Toby came about the plant. You do not know your danger, Theoden, interrupted Gandalf. These hobbits will sit on the edge of ruin and discuss the pleasures of the table or the small doings of their fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers, and remoter cousins to the 9th degree if you encourage them with undue patience. Some other time would be more fitting for the history of smoking. Where is Treebeard, Merry? Away on the north side, I believe. He went to get a drink of clean water. Most of the other Ents are with him, still busy at their work, over there. Merry waved his hand towards the steaming lake. and as they looked, they heard a distant rumbling and rattling, as if an avalanche was falling from the mountainside. Far away came a as of horns blowing triumphantly. "And is Orthanc then left unguarded?" asked Gandalf. "There is the water," said Merry, "but Quickbeam and some others are watching it. Not all those posts and pillars in the plain are of Saruman's planting. Quickbeam, I think, is by the rock near the foot of the stair." "Yes, a tall grey Ent is there," said Legolas, "but his arms are at his sides, and he stands as still as a door-tree." "It is past noon," said Gandalf, "and we at any rate have not eaten since early morning. Yet I wish to see Treebeard as soon as may be. Did he leave no message, or has plate and bottle driven it from your mind?" "He left a message," said Merry, "and I was coming to it, but I have been hindered by many other questions. I was to say that, if the Lord of the Mark and Gandalf will ride to the northern wall, they will find Treebeard there, and he will welcome them. I may add that they will also find food of the best there. It was discovered and selected by your humble servants." He bowed again. Gandalf laughed. "That is better," he said. "Well, Theoden, will you ride with me to find Treebeard? We must go round about, but it is not far. When you see Treebeard, you will learn much, for Treebeard is Fangorn, and the eldest and chief of the Ents, and when you speak with him, you will hear the speech of the oldest of all living things." "I will come with you," said Theoden. "Farewell, my hobbits. May we meet again in my house. Then you shall sit beside me and tell me all that your hearts desire, the deeds of your grandsires, as far as you can reckon them, and we will speak also of Tobold the Old and his herb lore. Farewell." The hobbits bowed low. "So that is the King of Rohan," said Pippin in an undertone. "A fine old fellow, very polite." End of chapter 8. All right, we're going to stop there, kiddos. I love you always and forever, no matter what.